Hello everyone, and welcome to our last set of notes for this unit. We are going to unfortunately bring about the end of the three Mesoamerican civilizations that we have learned about today. We'll have a quiz on Thursday, but just a little baby short unit here today. So let's dive right in. These should be a quick set of notes. So even though our Aztec, Mayan, and Inca populations have been living in their empires and their city-states for hundreds of years, possibly even over 1,000 years, they are brought to an end by Spain. Spain sends out some explorers, figures out what's going on over here. When they come into contact with these powerful civilizations, they really have to step up their game. And they send over some conquistadors. These are conquerors. That's literally what conquistadors means. It's just a Spanish word for conqueror. We have three conquistadors that we need to know about. Cortez is like the lead guy. He was like their superstar, and he technically conquered both the Aztecs and the Mayans. But this guy is also a little important too, so we'll throw him in there. If you were like, I don't know, hint, hint, taking a quiz on this stuff, you might want to make sure you remember which conquistador conquered which population. That might be something that you would be asked. So maybe you want to be able to match those appropriately. Yes? Excellent. So our conquistadors, don't laugh at my pronunciation. We have Hernan Cortez. I'm supposed to have accents in there. Still can't figure out how to do accents on this computer. Hernan Cortez conquers the Aztecs. Pedro de Alvarado conquers the Mayans. And I always think this guy's Italian, but he's not. He is Spanish. Francisco Pizarro. He conquers our Inca people. Again, if you were taking a quiz, you might want to remember these and be able to match them. Here are our gentlemen looking stylish. A lovely pair of shorts on the showman, and he's paired it with some flats and some tights. Not a look I would go for, but anyway. So we have Cortez over here. This is Alvarado in the middle, and then you've got Pizarro over here. You can see his name, his Latin name, Franciscus Pizarrodus. Okay, Spain was Roman Catholic, so that's probably his Latin name, his Catholic name. But yeah, there they are, styling, profiling, an interesting hat. Okay, anyway. Now, many things bring about the end of the American civilizations, but the number one most influential thing, the cause of death for most of our Mesoamerican people is disease. You can see here I've written it 3 times. I've written in bold. If I could make it pop off the screen at you, I would. A lot of people want to think, well, oh, Spain had guns and the native people did not. That's why. No. It is an influential factor. Here it is in number 2. But disease is number 1. The most influential reason why Spain was able to defeat Mesoamerica. Let's talk about why. Usually, this is obviously, I'm not a scientist, so I can't speak to this, on a super specific level. But usually, if you survive a disease or get a vaccine for a disease, okay, you get a little bit of immunity, or at least you have a better chance of surviving future recurrences of that disease, okay? We've seen this through history, right? We learned about the Black Death, the Black Plague in our Dark Ages game board and our feudalism hyperdoc. Europeans who were able to survive that plague for whatever reason kind of gained a little bit of immunity to it. That isn't to say that they'd never get sick again. That isn't to say that they still could die from that disease. But they got a little bit of immunity to it, meaning their body, their immune system, knew how to fight that disease a little bit better than the people who died, right? Because obviously the people who died. That immunity, it's possible for it to get passed down through your children, okay? So, Europe over time becomes accustomed to diseases that used to be huge problems for them. They become kind of run of the mill. The Black Death, um, some plagues are different. We have cholera outbreaks and dysentery outbreaks. Those are a little different. Those are hygienic based. The Spanish flu, all these kinds of different diseases that they can become accustomed to over time. Again, that doesn't mean they can't die from them. They don't have super immunity or anything like that. It just means that over time, they're not killing as many people. Mesoamerica has never interacted with Europeans before. So, Mesoamericans have not experienced European diseases. Therefore, again, no Mesoamericans have any kind of immunity or resistance to European diseases. In fact, many of the conquistadors and the soldiers they brought over carried diseases on them but weren't sick because their body was able to fight off these diseases. They had a little bit of the immunity. Okay? It's not like they were sneezing and coughing up a storm on these poor Native Americans, although sometimes they did purposefully infect them. That's a whole different story. So, once Mesoamerican people come into contact with these Europeans, they start to catch European diseases. Like I said, things that at the time Europe wasn't super concerned about. Spanish flu. That's the only one that's coming to my head right now. Like I said, dysentery and cholera are based on hygiene and water. The Black Death, right? Other kinds of European diseases that were new to the Mesoamerican people. And we see huge numbers of Mesoamerican people die off as a result of these diseases. Not only do they not have immunity, they also do not know how to care for people with these diseases. They have no known treatments because they've never seen somebody with these diseases. Makes a little bit of sense if you think about it. Okay. Like I said, later on we start purposefully infecting people. But disease was a huge factor. In some places, it depends from, Caribbean island to island or Native American civilization, but in some places we see as much as 90% of the original populations die from diseases. 90%. That means for every 10 people you look at, 9 of them are going to die. That's nuts. That is way more powerful than any weapon could ever be. Blows my mind. And this becomes a problem in all American civilizations. We see the same problem with English settlements when we learn about United States history. We see the same problem with farther north. It happens anytime Europeans come into contact with non-European interacting civilizations, if that makes sense. As I said, this is number 2, Spain's military strength, especially use of guns and gunpowder. A lot of people think that's number 1. It is important, but it's not like the native peoples were like total idiots who never could defend themselves. Native populations got in wars with each other. Tribes would go to war with each other. They had strong military skills. They had strong military discipline and training. They didn't have gunpowder, but they weren't just like willy-nilly throwing pebbles at each other. But gunpowder ultimately does kind of win out. I mean, it is a gun, so they weren't great guns, but still. Additionally, something that brings about the end of the Mesoamerican civilizations is forced enslavement. Once Europe, particularly Spain, when we talk about the Caribbean and Central and South America, once they figured out, oh my gosh, we could set up a bunch of mines and stuff and be like mining gold and iron and all these stuff that we can sell. We can also set up plantations where we grow crops that we can sell back in Europe. We'll grow things like sugar. Everybody loves sugar. And we'll force the native people to be slaves and work the plantations and work in the mines. It's going to be fantastic. Of course, obviously for the native people, it wasn't fantastic. You know, slavery as a word typically implies not good working conditions. And that's true here. Slavery was very harsh on native populations. Not only do we see the basics of slavery, exhaustion, overworking, malnourishment, not getting enough food, starvation, but we see just kind of savagery in general. If I remember correctly, the punishment for stealing was getting a hand cut off. I mean, what? You couldn't have any relationships with native people. If a native person was found to have a relationship with somebody who was not natives, who was of European descent, they could be put to death. Stealing, running away, escape, those kinds of things were all punishable by very, very severe punishments. And it was obviously something that took a toll on the native people and also saw many native deaths as a result, unfortunately. The Spanish are not the only ones to blame, though. Rest of Europe pretty much gets themselves involved, too. We've probably heard of Christopher Columbus. He's probably one of our more famous European explorers. I'm going to try really hard not to pop off about Christopher Columbus. I am not a member of the Christopher Columbus fan club. Bit of a nincompoop, if you ask me, and also kind of a jerk. But he explores for Spain. He was not actually Spanish. He was actually Italian. But the Italian government was like, dude, we're not giving you money to go, like, search for whatever you're searching for. And so he tries to get some other governments to do it, and finally Spain was like, you're weird, but here's some money. Here, you can just go. And so he sailed off on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and he gets to the Caribbean. He lands on the island of Hispaniola, which is today Haiti, and I'm pretty sure the Dominican Republic. And he's just like, he gets people to try and talk to his Arabic translator, and nobody speaks Arabic because obvious. And he's like, wow, I don't think we're in India right now. I was trying to find some spices in India. Let's call these the West Indies. They must be near India. They were not. And he's finally like, oh my god, we're not in India. Let's go back and tell everyone in Europe what we found. Also, let's steal some people. And so he steals some native people, and he brings them back to Spain, and he shows everybody, like, plants and, you know, like, flowers and stuff, and he's like, oh, also I stole some native people. Look how good they would be for slaves. And everyone was like, yeah, Christopher Columbus, you're so right. Let's go enslave everyone. And he was like, cool, can I lead it? And they were like, sure. And that's how Christopher Columbus became a slave owner. No, I'm not kidding. Anyway, I promised myself I wouldn't get off on Christopher Columbus. But anyway, that's Chris. England also gets in the game. They send out John Cabot with an interesting beard. And he mostly explores the north part of the kind of American continents, what is today the East Coast of North America, the United States. They didn't want to travel too far south because Spain pretty much had a decent claim on that at this point, and it could have started a war with Spain, which eventually it does. Yikes. We talk just a little bit about John Cabot when we start United States history. So if you guys ever have United States history with me, you will hear his name again very briefly. But those are our other, and Portugal's still in the game. France is sort of in the game. They're more up in Canada and a little bit later. And we don't really talk about them. But everybody in Europe is pretty much in the exploration game at this point. These notes focus very heavily on Spain, simply because they're the only country to really bring about the end to these civilizations we just talked about. But they are certainly not the only country to end civilizations, unfortunately. Spain takes over much of the Caribbean islands, much of Central America, and much of South America. That's why many of those countries speak Spanish or a dialect or a version of Spanish. Brazil was a Portuguese colony. That's why they speak Portuguese mainly in Brazil, of course, among other languages. And then there are some French Caribbean islands. That's why some islands you'll notice in the Caribbean do not speak Spanish or Portuguese. They speak French. And that's why. Why has Europe done this? They take the land from these civilizations and they turn them into colonies, basically smaller territories controlled by a larger, more established country. A colony's purpose is to make money for the country that controls it. Okay? And that can be done through a variety of ways. Flat out finding gold, or by growing or mining something, producing something that can be sold for money. Most of these colonies run off of slavery. I would say all, but I have a feeling there's probably like one sneaky one in there that might not. But it's many, 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 many of these colonies use slave labor. They're not paying the workers. Therefore, these plantations are almost entirely profit. They're able to just rake in the money because they're not paying any of their workers. Since these colonies are making them so much money, European countries start to scramble, start to rush to get as much land they can possibly get their hands on in order to make as much money as they possibly can. Which is why we see huge swaths, huge sections of the Americans conquered by European countries. As I said, a lot of it goes to Spain. The Portuguese get Brazil. They conquer Brazil. A little bit of French in the Caribbean. They also get what is today Canada, and the English get what is the east coast of the United States today, which obviously turns into something much larger after we were no longer colonies. And this brings about the kind of age of exploration and colonization. And it gets worse as the years go on, unfortunately. Same thing happens to Africa. I'm not even going to get into that because that's going to take me 20 more minutes to talk about that. But these colonies make Europe so much money, they continue to have them. And we're moving into a more modern age. Maybe those colonies might, I don't know, rebel. Bum, bum, bum. Anyway, that's the end of these notes. Make sure you finish all the assignments in this unit. Prepare yourself for the quiz, and the quiz will be posted on Thursday. Goodbye.